Chapter 1. The Breach. The landscape was a hellish mockery of earth. Barbed wire stretched endlessly, twisted into impossible geometries that seemed to move in peripheral vision. Shell craters filled with oily, black water reflected a sky the color of dried blood. In the distance, the spires of a corrupted city pierced the horizon, their architecture defying earthly physics. The thunder of artillery echoed across the wasteland. Smoke and the stench of sulfur filled the air. Sergeant Marcus Kozlov crouched in a forward trench, his weathered face marked by years of war. His new Antioch uniform bore the crossed sword's insignia. He checked his blessed rifle, muttering a practiced prayer. "Remember," he told his men, "short bursts, blessed ammunition only. The heretics don't die easy, but they do die." Beside him, War Prophet Ezra knelt in fervent prayer. His trench pilgrim robes were stained with mud and old blood. Sacred texts dangled from his belt. His eyes burned with zealous fire. "The Almighty has shown me visions of victory," Ezra declared. "Today we reclaim another yard of his holy ground from the damned." Private Sofia Reyes, young and still shaken by the horrors she had witnessed, gripped her rifle with white knuckles. Her new Antioch uniform was too big for her small frame. She whispered a prayer to Saint Michael for protection. A few meters away, a communicant stood motionless. Once human, it was now something else entirely. Pale skin stretched over an elongated frame, surgical scars marking where metachrist tissue had been grafted. Its eyes held a terrible awareness. Corporal Hassan al-Baghdadi, the Iron Sultanate liaison officer, checked his alchemical grenades. His uniform bore Arabic script woven with protective wards. "Your prophet's visions speak of victory," Hassan said in accented English. "Mine speak of survival. Today, I follow survival." An artillery shell screamed overhead and exploded in the heretic positions ahead. The ground shook violently. "That's our signal," Marcus shouted over the noise. "For New Antioch, for the faithful." Ezra raised his blessed blade high. The patrol charged from their trench. Marcus led 5 New Antioch soldiers. Ezra brought 3 trench pilgrims, and the Communicant, Hassan, represented the Iron Sultanate alliance. They advanced across the scarred earth toward a line of twisted metal and black stone, a heretic legion fortification that seemed to writhe with malevolent life. Muzzle flashes erupted from the enemy position. The distinctive crack of infernal weapons split the air. A New Antioch soldier stumbled, his blessed armor smoking where an unholy bullet had struck. "Cover," Marcus yelled. "Use the shell holes." The patrol spread out, using crater lips for protection. Sofia dove into a hole filled with oily water, coming up gasping and retching. "The water," she choked out. "It's warm, and it's moving." Hassan tossed an alchemical grenade. It exploded in a burst of silver fire, and inhuman screams echoed from the enemy position. "Taquan fire," Hassan called out. "It burns their essence." Ezra stood exposed, arms spread wide, as bullets whined past him. "He shields the righteous," the prophet cried. "I am untouchable in his sight." "Get down, you mad bastard," Marcus roared. A massive artillery shell, larger than any earthly weapon, arced through the sky. The Communicant pointed at it with an elongated finger. "Hellfire," it said in a voice like breaking glass. "Incoming." The shell struck between the patrol and their home trenches. The explosion was not just physical, nor reality tore, showing glimpses of burning landscapes beyond. The blast wave threw everyone to the ground. When the smoke cleared, their path back was blocked by a chasm that dropped into red-lit depths. Inhuman laughter echoed from below. "Sound off," Marcus called, coughing as he got to his feet. "Who's alive?" One by one, they responded. 7 survivors remained: Marcus, Sofia, and 2 other new Antioch soldiers, Private Chen and Corporal Dmitri. Ezra, 1 trench pilgrim named Brother Augustine, and the communicant, Hassan. Hassan stared at the chasm in horror. "The ground, it bleeds." Indeed, red liquid seeped from the torn earth. "How do we get back?" Sofia asked desperately. "The radio's dead, and that hole goes down forever." Ezra stood and brushed dirt from his robes. "The Lord tests us. This is our trial. We go forward, not back." "Forwards through heretic territory," Marcus replied grimly. "We need to circle around, find another way to our lines." "No," Ezra insisted. "Forward is the path of faith. He will provide." The 2 leaders stared at each other. The theological and tactical divide was clear. Hassan consulted a brass instrument. "My astrolabe shows the spiritual corruption is strongest to the east. We should go west, along the old road." "What old road?" Chen asked. "Everything here's been shelled to hell." The communicant walked to a pile of rubble and touched it. Where its fingers made contact, stones shifted, revealing carved symbols beneath. "Pilgrimage route," it said, its voice echoing strangely. "To Jerusalem." Brother Augustine nodded knowingly. "The ancient paths still exist beneath the devastation. The communicant can sense them." Marcus made his decision. "We move west. Stay together. Stay quiet. Every shadow could hide the enemy." As they gathered their gear, Sofia knelt by the chasm's edge and looked down into the red-lit depths. "Sergeant," she said quietly, "I can hear singing down there, hymns, but wrong somehow." "Don't listen," Marcus warned her. "That's how they get in your head." They formed up to move out. The communicant took point, its enhanced senses detecting threats. Ezra muttered prayers under his breath. Hassan checked his alchemical supplies. As they disappeared into the hellish landscape, the full scope of the devastation became clear. An endless battlefield where the war between heaven and hell had raged for 8 centuries. Chapter 2: No Man's Land. The patrol moved through a landscape that defied comprehension. What had once been farmland and villages was now a twisted hellscape where the very earth seemed to writhe in agony. The communicant led them along paths visible only to its enhanced senses, following ancient pilgrimage routes that had somehow survived 8 centuries of devastation. Sergeant Marcus kept his rifle ready, eyes scanning for threats. The silence was worse than the artillery. In quiet moments like these, the land itself seemed to whisper. Behind him, Private Sofia stepped carefully around pools of water that reflected no sky, only darkness. "Stay on the path," the communicant warned in its broken voice. "The ground remembers pain." War Prophet Ezra walked with confident strides, his faith seemingly unshaken by their predicament. "The Lord guides our steps," he proclaimed quietly. "Every yard we reclaim from darkness is a victory." "Quiet," Marcus hissed. "Sound carries here in ways it shouldn't." Hassan consulted his astrolabe again, frowning at the readings. "The spiritual corruption grows stronger as we move west. This makes no sense. We should be moving away from the heretic strongholds." Brother Augustine, the surviving trench pilgrim, clutched his prayer beads. Perhaps the Lord tests our resolve. Faith is stronger when forged in adversity. They came to what had once been a crossroads. The signpost still stood, but the words on it writhed and changed as they watched, Latin shifting to Arabic, to scripts that hurt to look at directly. "Don't read the signs," Hassan warned. "Some knowledge poisons the mind." Private Chen pointed to their left. "Sergeant, there's movement in that crater." Marcus raised his fist, and the patrol froze. In a shell hole 50 meters away, something pale and elongated moved between twisted metal debris. It might have been human once. "Black Grail," whispered Corporal Dmitri. The plague touched. The thing in the crater turned toward them. Its face was a ruin of stretched skin and too many teeth. It began to sing, Initis, a hymn Marcus recognized from his childhood, but wrong in every note. "It knows we're here," Sofia breathed. "Then we move," Marcus decided, quickly and quietly. "Don't engage unless we have to." They skirted the crater, giving it a wide berth. The plague-touched thing continued its obscene hymn, but made no move to follow. As they passed, Hassan noticed something troubling. "There are more in the other craters," he said quietly. "They're watching us, but not attacking." "Why?" Ezra's eyes blazed with understanding. "They fear the righteous. Our faith protects us. Or they're hurting us," Marcus countered grimly. The landscape ahead was even more disturbed. Barbed wire had grown into impossible shapes, forming archways and spirals that seemed to serve no military purpose. Some of the wire moved without wind, reaching toward the patrol like grasping fingers. The communicant stopped suddenly. "Wrong," it said. "The path it divides." Before them, the ancient pilgrimage route split in 3 directions. The leftmost path led toward what looked like intact buildings in the distance. The center path disappeared into a maze of wire and twisted metal. The rightmost path sloped downward into mist. "Which way?" Marcus asked. The communicant tilted its head, listening to something only it could hear. "All paths lead to Jerusalem," it said finally, "but not all who walk them arrive whole." Hassan studied his instruments. "The left path shows the least corruption, but, Sofia prompted. "But nothing that easy survives in this place without reason." Ezra stepped forward confidently. "The center path. Through adversity comes salvation." "The center path is a killing ground," Marcus observed. "Look at all that wire, perfect for an ambush." Brother Augustine knelt and pressed his ear to the ground. "I hear water running beneath the right path. Perhaps an old stream. Water cleanses. Water can also drown," Dmitri pointed out. As they debated, the plague touched in the craters began to move, not toward the patrol, but repositioning themselves, slowly, deliberately. "We're running out of time," Marcus said. "They're coordinating somehow." Sofia noticed something else troubling. "The wire, it's growing. The paths are getting narrower." Indeed, the barbed wire barriers seemed to be extending themselves, slowly closing off their options. "The Lord provides a test," Ezra declared. "We must choose with faith, not fear." "Faith without wisdom is foolishness," Hassan replied, "and foolishness gets people killed." The communicant suddenly raised its hand. "Voices," it said, "human voices, from the left path." They all listened. Faintly, carried on the toxic wind, came the sound of singing, not the twisted hymns of the plague-touched, but something that sounded almost normal, almost human. "Survivors?" Sofia asked hopefully. Or bait, Marcus replied, but even he seemed torn. In this hellscape, the possibility of finding other living humans was almost irresistible. The wire continued to grow. Soon they would have no choice at all. We go left, Marcus decided, but weapons ready. If it's a trap, we fight our way out. Ezra smiled grimly. Finally you begin to show faith, Sergeant. I show pragmatism, Marcus corrected. Faith is your department. They moved toward the left path, the sound of human voices growing clearer. Behind them, the plague-touched began to emerge from their craters, but they made no immediate move to follow. They simply watched, as if waiting for something. The buildings ahead resolved into clearer detail as they approached. It was a small village, somehow largely intact, despite the devastation around it. Smoke rose from chimneys, light glowed in windows, and from the village church came the sound of evening prayers. It's too perfect, Hassan muttered. Perhaps, said Brother Augustine, that is precisely why it's real. In a land cursed by hell, might not heaven provide one small sanctuary? The communicant stopped at the village's edge. I cannot enter, it said simply. Why not? Sofia asked. Too much light, it replied. Too much hope. It burns. Marcus looked back. The plague-touched had begun to follow them, but slowly, as if they too found something about the village difficult to approach. We need shelter for the night, Marcus said finally. And if there are other survivors, we need to know. And if it's a trap, Dmitri asked. Marcus checked his blessed ammunition. Then we spring it on our terms. As they approached the village gates, the singing stopped. A figure appeared in the doorway of the church, a priest in clean white robes, unmarked by the war's devastation. Welcome, children, the priest called out. Come, be at peace. You are safe here. Behind them, the communicant remained at the village boundary, its enhanced form unable to cross into whatever sanctuary the place provided. The plague-touched had stopped their advance entirely, forming a loose circle around the village, but coming no closer. The patrol stood at the threshold between the hellish wasteland and this impossible haven, forced to choose between the known dangers behind them and the uncertain promises ahead. Chapter 3. The Sanctuary. The village seemed to exist in a bubble of peace that defied the war-torn world around it. Clean cobblestones lined the streets, unmarked by blood or shell damage. Gardens bloomed with flowers that should not have been able to grow in the poisoned soil. The air smelled of bread baking and incense burning, not sulfur and death. Father Benedict, the priest who had welcomed them, was a man of perhaps 60 years, with kind eyes and soft hands that showed no calluses from hard labor or weapon handling. He led them through streets populated by villagers who smiled and nodded as they passed, men, women, and children, all dressed in simple, clean clothes. How is this possible? Marcus asked quietly as they walked. The war has touched everything for hundreds of miles. Faith, my son, Father Benedict replied serenely. When the people of this village heard of the gates of hell opening in Jerusalem, they gathered in the church and prayed without ceasing. For 800 years, their descendants have maintained that vigil. Prayer is our shield, faith our fortress. Sofia looked around in wonder at children playing in the street, actual children, laughing and running, untouched by the horrors that had shaped her young life. It's beautiful, she whispered. Hassan remained skeptical, his hand never straying far from his weapons. 800 years of prayer. No one's faith is that perfect. Doubt is the enemy's weapon, Brother Augustine said. but even he seemed uneasy. Yet, where are the elderly? The sick? In any population, there should be. The Lord provides for his faithful, Father Benedict interrupted smoothly. Come, you must be hungry. Sister Margaret has prepared a meal. The church was a simple stone building, but beautiful in its simplicity. Candles burned before painted icons of saints, their faces serene, and eyes that seemed to follow the visitors. The altar was pristine white marble, unmarked by the violence that had consumed the world outside. A dozen villagers sat in the pews, praying silently. They looked up as the patrol entered, smiled beatifically, then returned to their devotions. Their lips moved in unison, though no sound emerged. They pray constantly? Ezra asked, and for the first time his voice held uncertainty rather than conviction. The prayer must never cease. Father Benedict explained. Should it falter for even a moment, the protection would fail. They understand their duty. Sister Margaret emerged from a side door, carrying a tray of food, bread, cheese, wine, and meat that looked fresher than anything they had seen in months. She was a woman of middle years, with the same kind eyes and unmarked hands as the priest. Eat, brave soldiers, she said in a voice like honey. Restore your strength. Marcus studied the food suspiciously. We appreciate the hospitality, but we can't stay long. We need to reach our lines. Of course, Father Benedict agreed. But surely you can rest for the night. The wasteland is no place to travel in darkness. The things that hunt in those shadows are worse than what walks in daylight. Outside the church windows, they could see the Communicant still standing at the village boundary. It had not moved since they entered, standing as still as a statue. Our companion cannot enter, Dmitri observed. Why? Father Benedict's expression grew sad. The poor creature has been altered, corrupted. The holy ground rejects what is not purely human. The Communicant has metachrist tissue grafted into its body, Ezra said defensively. It carries pieces of our Savior. Does it? Father Benedict asked gently. Or does it carry something else, something that merely claims to be holy? The question hung in the air, like incense smoke. Hassan had been examining the food closely, and now looked up with a frown. This meat, he said quietly. What animal is it from? Sister Margaret smiled. We raise our own livestock. Everything we need, the Lord provides within our borders. I've seen no animals, Hassan pressed. No cattle, no sheep, no chickens. They graze in the fields beyond the village, Father Benedict explained. Would you like to see them tomorrow? Sofia had taken a small bite of bread and paused, chewing slowly. It tastes strange, sweet, but not like grain. Brother Augustine stood abruptly. We should check on our companion, he said. The Communicant has protected us well. We shouldn't abandon it to the darkness alone. Sit, brother, Father Benedict said, and his voice carried a subtle authority that made Augustine pause. Your duty is to the living, not to that thing. That thing was once human, Marcus said firmly, a volunteer who gave up his humanity to serve the faith. We don't abandon our own. The villagers in the pews stopped their silent prayers and turned to look at the patrol. Their faces remained peaceful, but something in their eyes had changed. Their smiles seemed wider, showing more teeth than before. You speak of faith, Father Benedict said, but you travel with the corrupted, with the Islamic, with those who doubt. True faith requires purity. True faith requires compassion, Ezra replied, but his voice lacked its usual fire. Hassan had moved to the window, and was looking out at the communicant. "Something's wrong," he said urgently. "It's changing." They rushed to the windows. The communicant still stood motionless at the village boundary, but its form was becoming translucent. They could see through it to the hellscape beyond. "It's fading," Sofia gasped. "The holy ground is purifying the area," Father Benedict explained calmly, "driving out the unnatural elements." "That's not purification," Marcus snarled, raising his rifle. "That's murder." The villagers rose from their pews as one, their movements perfectly synchronized. Their smiles had become rictus grins, their kind eyes now empty holes. "You are all welcome to stay," Father Benedict said, his voice taking on a harmonic quality, as if multiple voices spoke in unison. "Forever, in perfect peace, perfect faith, perfect purity." Sister Margaret's form began to shift, her kindly appearance melting away to reveal something pale and elongated beneath. "We have been so lonely," she said in a voice like breaking glass. "So very lonely for so very long." Hassan drew his scimitar. "Not angels," he spat. "Demons. They've been feeding off the prayer, the faith itself. Parasites." Ezra breathed, his conviction finally returning. "They consume devotion and give back emptiness." The false villagers advanced with perfectly synchronized steps. Their faces were melting away now, revealing the pale, stretched features of plague touched beneath. "We offered you peace," Father Benedict said, his form growing taller and more terrible. "We offered you an end to doubt, to struggle, to the pain of thought itself. Why do you refuse paradise?" "Because paradise isn't empty," Marcus said, firing a blessed round into the creature's chest, "and it sure as hell isn't bought with lies." The battle erupted in the confined space of the church. The false villagers moved with inhuman coordination, but they had grown soft from centuries of feeding on passive faith. The patrol fought with the desperation of soldiers who had survived 800 years of war. Sofia's rifle sang as she put blessed rounds into target after target. Hassan's alchemical fire burned away illusions, revealing the true forms of their enemies. Ezra wielded his blessed blade with renewed fury, his faith purified by recognizing its counterfeit. Brother Augustine fell to his knees and began to pray, not the empty words of the villagers' false devotion, but real prayer, filled with pain and hope and genuine faith. The sound of it made the creatures recoil. Outside, as genuine faith filled the church, the communicant began to solidify again. The false sanctuary's power was breaking. The battle was brief, but vicious. When it ended, the church was filled with dissolving corpses that stank of sulfur and false promises. The beautiful village was revealed as ruins, collapsed buildings, poisoned ground, and the bones of pilgrims who had sought sanctuary here over the centuries. "We have to go," Marcus said, checking his ammunition. "This place will draw more of them." They emerged from the ruined church to find the communicant fully solid again, standing guard at what was now clearly a circle of blessed ground surrounded by absolute desolation. "You are well?" it asked in its broken voice. "We are," Ezra replied, and there was genuine warmth in his voice as he looked at the creature. "Thank you for waiting." Behind them, the false sanctuary crumbled to dust, leaving only the memory of what desperate faith could become when it lost sight of truth. They gathered their gear and prepared to move back into the honest horror of no man's land. At least there, they knew what they were fighting. Chapter 4. Visions and Doubts. Dawn broke gray and poisonous over the wasteland As the patrol made camp in the ruins of what had once been a farmhouse, the walls provided some shelter from the wind that carried voices and whispers from the battlefield beyond. They had walked through the night after escaping the false sanctuary, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and whatever other horrors might be drawn to that cursed place. Marcus set up a watch rotation, while the others tried to rest. Sofia sat with her back against a broken wall, staring at her rifle. The blessed ammunition was running low. They all were conserving rounds now, knowing that once their holy weapons were empty, they would have only steel and prayer against the forces of hell. "You did well back there," Marcus told her quietly. "Kept your head when it mattered." "I don't feel like I did well," Sofia replied. "I wanted to believe it was real, even when I knew something was wrong. Part of me wanted to stay in that lie." "That's what made you strong enough to fight it," Hassan said from where he was checking his alchemical supplies. "The ones who fall to such deceptions are those who never question, never doubt." Ezra, who had been praying silently since they made camp, looked up sharply. "Doubt is the enemy's weapon. Faith is our shield. Faith without wisdom is blind," Hassan countered, "and blind faith is easily corrupted." "You speak of corruption?" Ezra stood, his eyes blazing. "You who follow a false prophet, you who deny Christ's divinity." "I follow the God of Abraham," Hassan replied calmly, "the same God you claim to serve, though you have wrapped him in so many lies you can barely see his face." Marcus stepped between them. "Enough. We're all tired, we're all scared, and we're all a long way from home. Save the theological debates for when we're not surrounded by demons." Brother Augustine, who had been silent since the battle, spoke up. "Perhaps both views contain truth. Perhaps the God we seek transcends our understanding of him." "Heresy," Ezra snapped. "Is it?" Augustine asked, sadly. "I have prayed for years, followed every doctrine, obeyed every command, yet I felt more of God's presence in that communicant's loyalty than in all the church's grand ceremonies." The communicant, standing watch at the ruined doorway, turned its elongated head toward them. "God," it said in its broken voice, "is love. Even in this form, I feel loved." Ezra stared at the creature, conflict plain on his face. Everything he had been taught, said the communicant, was an abomination, a violation of the human form, yet it had shown more pure faith than many priests. "I had a vision," Ezra said suddenly. "Before the battle yesterday, I saw us reaching Jerusalem, but in the vision, not all of us were human anymore." "What do you mean?" Sofia asked. Ezra struggled with the words. "I saw myself, but changed, enhanced, and I was content with it, happy even. The vision felt holy, but now I wonder, enhancement isn't always corruption," Hassan said thoughtfully. "My people's alchemists work to perfect the human form. Perhaps your God shows you the same path by different means." "The Meta-Christ program," Brother Augustine said slowly. "We're told it makes us more like him, but what if it makes us more like what we need to be? What if the form matters less than the spirit within?" Sofia had been listening to this debate with growing unease. "What if we're all wrong?" she said quietly. "What if there is no God? What if we're just people killing each other over stories we tell ourselves?" The silence that followed was profound. Even in the wasteland's constant whispers, this moment felt absolutely still. "I have seen too much to believe that," Marcus said finally. "Blessing and curse, miracle and horror. There are powers beyond us at work here. But Are they what we think they are? Sofia pressed. The demons could be real without our religions being true. The miracles could be real without our understanding of them being correct. Hassan nodded slowly. In the House of Wisdom, we say that God is too great to be contained by any single understanding. Perhaps we fight the same war from different sides of the same truth. Blasphemy, Ezra said, but without his usual fire. Is it? Augustine asked again. Or is it the beginning of real wisdom? The communicant spoke again, its voice carrying across the ruins. Enemy, movement, east and south. They hunt. The theological debate was forgotten as the patrol prepared for action. Marcus checked his position through a gap in the wall. In the distance, dark shapes moved through the maze of trenches and shell holes, too coordinated to be plague-touched, too numerous to be a simple patrol. Heretic Legion, he identified, a full platoon at least, and they're following our trail. How can you tell? Sofia asked. They move with purpose, and they have one of those. Hassan peered through his spyglass. The tracking demon. It follows the scent of faith itself. They've been hunting us since we left the false sanctuary. Can we outrun them? Dmitri asked. Not with them having a tracker, Marcus replied grimly, and not while carrying wounded. Brother Augustine touched his side, where a claw had raked him in the previous battle. The wound was festering, despite their prayers, taking on an unhealthy green tinge. Leave me, Augustine said simply. I'll slow you down, and the infection is spreading. Better one death than 7. No one gets left behind, Marcus said firmly. The sergeant is right, Ezra added, and there was something different in his voice now. Less certainty, but more compassion. We face this together. Together, the communicant agreed from its post. Always together. Hassan was studying his maps and instruments. There's an old mine shaft, 2 kilometers northwest. Pre-war. Iron extraction. If it's still intact, we could lose them in the tunnels. Underground. Sofia shuddered. What if we get lost down there? Better than getting caught up here, Marcus decided. We move out in 5 minutes. Stay low, stay quiet, and pray to whatever gods you follow that those tunnels lead somewhere safe. As they prepared to leave their temporary shelter, Ezra approached the communicant. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I thought your form made you less than human, but I see now that your spirit makes you more than human. The communicant stretched, features attempted something like a smile. We are all becoming what we need to be. Maybe that's what salvation really means, Ezra murmured. Not staying the same, but changing into something better. They gathered their meager supplies and prepared to venture into the unknown depths beneath the battlefield. Behind them, the Heretic Legion drew closer, guided by senses that could track faith itself through the poisoned landscape. The war above ground was horror enough. Now they would discover what horrors waited in the depths below. Chapter 5. The Hunt. The mine entrance yawned before them like a mouth opened in a silent scream. Pre-war safety notices hung in tatters from rusted posts, warnings in 3 languages about cave-ins and toxic gases. Now those seemed like quaint concerns compared to what hunted them above ground. Marcus tested the timber supports with his knife. Seems solid enough, he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. The wood's been treated with something that's kept it from rotting. Hassan examined the dark stains on the support beams. Blessed oil, maybe, or something else. The alchemical residue is unusual. We don't have a choice, Sofia said, glancing back at the approaching dust cloud that marked their pursuers. They're getting closer. The tracking demon's howl echoed across the wasteland, the sound like machinery screaming as it tore apart. Even at this distance, it made their bones ache. Down we go, Marcus decided. Communicant, can you see in the dark? Enhanced vision, it confirmed. I will lead. They descended into the earth, through passages carved by human hands, decades before the war consumed everything. The darkness swallowed them completely within minutes, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the scrape of boots on stone. The communicant moved ahead with a natural grace, its modified senses navigating obstacles the others couldn't see. Behind it, the patrol followed in single file, hands on the shoulder of the person in front, trusting to faith and hope in equal measure. How deep do these tunnels go? Sofia whispered. Deep enough to hide us, Marcus replied, though privately he wondered if they were descending into a trap worse than the one they'd fled. The tunnels branched and divided, creating a maze of passages that seemed to follow no earthly logic. Some corridors were wide enough for mining equipment, others narrowed to gaps barely wide enough for a single person. The air grew thick and strange, carrying scents that had no names. Brother Augustine's breathing grew labored. The infection from his wound was spreading, and the blessed bandages they'd applied seemed to be losing their power. I need to rest, he gasped, leaning against a tunnel wall. Hassan examined the wound by the light of a small alchemical torch. The green infection had spread up Augustine's side, and dark veins were visible beneath his skin. It's not just poison, Hassan said grimly. There's something supernatural in it. The wound itself is becoming a gateway. Gateway to what? Ezra asked, though his face suggested he already knew. To them, Augustine said simply. I can feel them in my blood, whispering, promising. They want me to guide you to them. Above them, they heard the first sounds of pursuit entering the mine. The heretic legion had found their trail. How long do you have? Marcus asked Augustine directly. Not long. Maybe an hour before I'm more theirs than ours. Augustine's voice was steady, accepting. You should kill me now, while I'm still myself. No, Ezra said firmly. There has to be another way. Your faith is admirable, Hassan said, but some infections can't be cured by prayer alone. The communicant had been silent during this exchange, but now it approached Augustine. May I try something? Augustine nodded weakly. The communicant placed its elongated hands on the infected wound. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Augustine screamed. Light poured from the communicant's fingers. Not the golden light of holy blessing, but something white and pure and terrible. The infection fought back, spreading black veins up Augustine's chest, but the light pursued it relentlessly. What are you doing? Sofia gasped. Sharing the gift, the communicant said through gritted teeth. Metachrist tissue fights corruption by becoming greater corruption. Augustine's screams echoed through the tunnels, surely alerting their pursuers to their location. But when the light faded, the infection was gone. In its place were surgical scars, identical to those on the communicant's body. I can see, Augustine whispered. Everything, the tunnels, the way out, the way in, and them. They're everywhere down here. What do you mean, everywhere? Marcus demanded. Augustine's newly enhanced vision showed him things the others couldn't perceive. This isn't just a mine. It's a nest. They've been breeding down here for decades. The miners didn't abandon this place. They were consumed by it. as if summoned by his words. Movement echoed from the tunnels around them, not the heavy boots of pursuing soldiers, but something skittering and organic. "We need to move," Marcus said. "Now." "Which way?" Dmitri asked. Augustine pointed deeper into the mine. "There's a way out, but it goes through the heart of their nest. Or we can try to fight our way back up, past the heretic legion." "Some choice," Chen muttered. The sounds of pursuit grew louder from above, while inhuman chittering echoed from the depths below. "The nest," Ezra decided. "At least there we face mindless beasts. The legion above thinks and plans." "These aren't mindless," Augustine corrected, his enhanced senses revealing more than he wanted to know. "They're organized, hierarchical, and they're hungry." The first of the mine's inhabitants scuttled into the light of Hassan's torch. It might have been human once, but centuries of feeding on corrupted ore and darker things had changed it into something else entirely. Its limbs were too long, its fingers ended in talons, and its eyes were black pits that reflected no light. Former miners, Hassan identified, transformed by prolonged exposure to whatever they were really digging for down here. More emerged from side passages, moving with predatory patience. They had all the time in the world. Their prey was trapped between them and the soldiers above. "They are hurting us," Marcus realized, "driving us towards something worse." "Then we don't go where they want us to go," Sofia said, with grim determination. "We make our own path." Hassan reached for his remaining explosives, the support beams. "If we bring down the right section, we can block their pursuit and create our own exit." "You'll bring the whole mine down on us," Dmitri protested. "Better buried than eaten," Hassan replied, preparing his charges. The creatures sensed the danger and attacked. What followed was a running battle through passages too narrow for proper tactics, where blessed weapons and alchemical fire lit up scenes from nightmare. The patrol fought desperately, while Hassan worked to place his explosives at strategic points. Augustine's enhanced abilities proved crucial. He could see the creatures coming before they struck, guide the patrol around dead ends, and identify which support beams were truly structural. The price of his transformation was written in pain across his face, but he paid it willingly. "Ready!" Hassan called out. They huddled together in an alcove as the charges detonated. The explosion shook the earth itself, bringing down tons of rock and creating a new passage upward toward the surface. But the blast also awakened something deeper in the mine. From far below came a roar that spoke of ancient hunger and endless patience finally reaching its end. "What was that?" Sofia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Augustine's face had gone pale. The reason this mine was really abandoned, the thing they accidentally dug up, and we just made it very, very angry. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble as something vast and terrible began to climb toward the surface. Behind them, the surviving creatures fled in terror from whatever their explosion had released. Above them lay the surface, the heretic legion, and the war they knew. Below them rose something from the deep places of the earth that predated human conflict entirely. They climbed toward the light, knowing that their troubles were far from over. Chapter 6. Faith and Steel. They emerged from the mine into a world transformed by twilight and horror. The heretic legion had not waited passively for their quarry to surface. They had prepared a killing ground. Defensive positions ringed the mine entrance, with clear fields of fire and cursed weapons that could end their flight permanently. Captain Malphas of the Heretic Legion stood among his troops, his once human form twisted by years of service to hell's hierarchy. Burned scars covered his face, where holy water had marked him during his pilgrimage to the gates, and his eyes glowed with infernal fire. 7 faithful souls, he called out in a voice like grinding metal. 7 chances for redemption through service to the true lords of this world. Surrender now, and your deaths will be educational rather than merely painful. Marcus counted the enemy positions through gaps in the rubble. At least 20 heretic legion soldiers, well armed and positioned. The tracking demon crouched beside their captain, its multiple eyes scanning the mine entrance with predatory patience. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," Marcus whispered to his patrol, "but we have one advantage. They think we're trapped." Behind them, the ground continued to shake as something ancient and terrible climbed toward the surface. Whatever Hassan's explosives had awakened was getting closer, and the tremors were growing stronger. "What's your plan, Sergeant?" Sofia asked, checking her remaining blessed ammunition. 3 rounds left. "We use their arrogance against them," Marcus replied. "They want us alive for interrogation and conversion. That means they won't use their heaviest weapons right away." Ezra had been praying silently, but now he looked up with new resolve. "I've been wrong about many things," he said quietly, "but I'm certain of this. We don't surrender. Not to them. Not ever." "Agreed," Hassan said, preparing his last alchemical charges. "Better to die as humans than live as slaves to hell." Augustine's enhanced vision swept the enemy positions. "There's a weakness in their line. Northeast corner, where that old shell crater creates a blind spot. If we can reach it, that's 50 meters of open ground," Dmitri pointed out. "We'll be cut down before we make it halfway." The communicant spoke up. "Not all of us. Some can draw fire, others can reach position." A distraction, Marcus understood. "But who volunteers for a suicide run?" "I will," Augustine said immediately. "My transformation makes me harder to kill, and I can see their positions clearly." "No," Ezra said firmly. "That's my role. I claim to have visions, to be chosen by God. Time to prove it." Before anyone could argue, the decision was taken from them. The thing from the deep mine finally reached the surface. It erupted from the earth like a living mountain, a creature of stone and metal and hungry darkness that had fed on corrupted ore for centuries. The dweller beneath, the miner's oldest fear, made manifest. Its emergence shattered the heretic legion's careful positions and sent soldiers scrambling for cover. "Now," Marcus shouted. The patrol scattered in different directions, using the chaos to break free from the kill zone. Sofia and Chen dove for the northeast crater. Hassan rolled behind a pile of twisted metal, his alchemical fires already burning in his hands. Dmitri sprinted for a destroyed vehicle that offered hard cover. Ezra and Augustine moved together, the prophet's faith and the enhanced soldier's abilities complementing each other perfectly. They drew fire from multiple positions, keeping the enemy focused, while Marcus and the Communicant flanked around the southern edge. The dweller beneath was indiscriminate in its hunger. Heretic Legion soldiers died as easily as anyone else when caught in its massive claws. Captain Malthus tried to maintain control, but his carefully planned ambush had become a 3-way battle. "Kill the creature," Malthus commanded, "then deal with the faithful." But his soldiers were already breaking ranks, some fleeing from the ancient horror, while others tried to fight it with weapons designed for human enemies. Infernal bullets sparked harmlessly off its stern hide, and cursed blades shattered against its armored bulk. Hassan's alchemical fire proved more effective. Silver flames ate into the creature's flesh, causing it to rear back with a sound like avalanches. The distraction gave Sofia a clear shot at the tracking demon. Her blessed round took the creature in what might have been its head. The bullet's holy power coursed through its unnatural body, causing it to convulse and dissolve into smoking ichor. Without their supernatural tracker, the heretic legion lost their tactical advantage. Augustine and Ezra had reached a commanding position on higher ground. Augustine's enhanced vision identified priority targets, while Ezra's faith seemed to guide his bullets with supernatural accuracy. Each shot from his rifle found its mark, blessed ammunition cutting through infernal armor like paper. "I can see why you believe," Augustine said as they fought side by side. "There's something beyond human skill in your shooting. And I can see why faith enhances the flesh," Ezra replied, watching Augustine's impossible reflexes save them both from incoming fire. "Perhaps we've both been touching different parts of the same truth." Marcus and the Communicant had reached the enemy's rear positions. The Communicant moved with fluid grace, its elongated limbs allowing it to strike from unexpected angles. Marcus followed behind, methodically eliminating confused soldiers who were still trying to figure out which threat to prioritize. "They're breaking," Marcus observed as Heretic Legion soldiers began a fighting retreat. "The creature's doing our work for us." But Captain Malphus was not ready to concede defeat. Drawing a blade that writhed with dark energy, he charged directly at the dweller beneath. His infernal strength allowed him to scale the creature's massive form, seeking some vital point to strike. "Fool," Hassan muttered, watching the captain's suicidal assault. "He thinks he can control it." The captain's cursed blade found its mark, driving deep into what might have been the creature's neck. But instead of killing it, the strike seemed to enrage it further. The dweller beneath thrashed wildly, crushing friend and foe alike in its fury. "We need to go," Marcus called out, while they're distracted. But Sofia was watching something else. "Look at the captain's blade," she said urgently. "It's not just wounding the creature, it's changing it." Indeed, where the cursed weapon had struck, the dweller's stern flesh was turning black and beginning to sprout additional limbs. The ancient creature was being corrupted, transformed into something even worse. "If that thing gets fully converted to hell service," Hassan began, "then we have problems beyond our current situation." Marcus finished. "Everyone out, now." They gathered their wounded and began to withdraw, but the transformed dweller was already adapting to its new nature. Its roars took on words, curses and languages that predated human speech, threats that made reality itself seem to quiver. Captain Malphus laughed triumphantly from his perch on the creature's back. "You cannot escape," he called out. "I am become death, destroyer of the faithful. My new mount will hunt you to the ends of the earth." But his triumph was short-lived. The Communicant had circled back, moving with purpose toward the base of the creature. In its hands was Hassan's last alchemical charge, modified with something from Augustine's medical kit. No, Marcus realized what it intended. There has to be another way. "There is not," the Communicant said, simply. "This is my purpose. To serve, to protect, to sacrifice." It pressed the modified explosive against what might have been the creature's heart and activated the timer. 20 seconds. "You are all worthy," it said to the patrol. "Remember?" 15 seconds. The patrol ran, carrying their wounded, leaving behind the being that had guided and protected them. 10 seconds. Captain Malphus realized the danger and tried to leap clear. 5 seconds. The Communicant looked up at the stars, barely visible through the smoke and poison of the eternal war. 0. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a small sun. Silver fire consumed the dweller from within, purifying centuries of corruption in an instant. Captain Malphas burned with it, his screams joining those of his monstrous mount as both were reduced to ash and memory. When the light faded, the patrol stood alone on the edge of the battlefield. Behind them lay the ruins of their enemies and their greatest protector. Ahead lay the uncertain path back to their own lines. "It saved us all," Sofia said quietly. "It chose to be human in the end," Ezra added, "more human than many who were born to the form." "We honor its sacrifice by surviving," Marcus said practically, "by getting home and telling this story." They gathered what supplies they could and began the long walk toward the distant glow that marked their own forces. Behind them, silver flames still flickered where the Communicant had made its final stand. Hassan looked back one last time. "In my faith we say that all souls return to Allah, regardless of the form they wore in life. I think that one returns with honor." "In all our faiths," Augustine agreed. "Some truths transcend doctrine." They walked through the night toward home, 7 soldiers bound together by shared loss and hard-won understanding. The war would continue, as it had for 8 centuries, but they had learned something in the darkness that might perhaps light their way forward. Chapter 7. Dawn. 3 days later, the survivors of the lost patrol limped into the forward positions of the new Antioch 15th Regiment. They were 6 now: Marcus, Sofia, Hassan, Ezra, Augustine, and Chen. Dmitri had stepped on a mine during their second night, and they had buried him beneath stones marked with symbols from 3 different faiths. The sentries barely recognized them, covered in mud and gore, bearing wounds, both physical and spiritual. They looked more like refugees than soldiers, but their identification held up under scrutiny, and soon they found themselves in the regimental command bunker, facing questions from officers who had never left the relative safety of established positions. Colonel Hassan, a career soldier who had spent 30 years fighting Hell's legions, looked up from his maps as they were brought in. His aide, Lieutenant Morrison, wrinkled his nose at their smell but maintained military courtesy. "Sergeant Kozlov," the colonel said without preamble, "you were reported missing 3 days ago after the failed assault on Hill 394. Your entire unit was presumed killed in action." "Most of them were, sir," Marcus replied. "We got separated from the main force when that hellfire shell opened a chasm. Been making our way back ever since." The colonel's eyes moved over the survivors, noting their condition and the unusual composition of their group. "You're traveling with a Trench Pilgrim war prophet, an Iron Sultanate liaison." He paused, studying Augustine, what appears to be a modified soldier. "Explain." "We fought together, sir. Survived together. The details are in my report." Colonel Harrison gestured to his aide, who produced paper and writing materials. "Then you'd better start reporting, Sergeant. And this had better be good. I've got 3 different intelligence services breathing down my neck about the explosions near the Grimdark mine complex." Over the next hour, Marcus recounted their journey. He spoke of the false sanctuary and its parasitic inhabitants, the mine system and its transformed occupants, the ancient creature they had awakened, and the Communicant's final sacrifice. The other survivors added details, their different perspectives painting a fuller picture of what they had endured. When they finished, Colonel Harrison sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. "This Communicant he said carefully. You're telling me it chose to sacrifice itself, voluntarily? Yes, sir, Marcus confirmed. No hesitation, no coercion. It saw what needed to be done, and did it. And the Heretic Legion captain, dead, sir, along with most of his unit, and that tracking demon. The explosion eliminated a significant enemy asset. The colonel made notes on his pad. The intelligence boys will want to debrief each of you separately. What you've described could change how we conduct operations in contested areas. With respect, sir, Ezra interjected, our experiences raise questions that go beyond military tactics. Colonel Harrison's eyebrows rose. Oh? The nature of faith itself, sir. What it means to be human in a war that transforms everyone it touches, whether the distinctions we fight over matter as much as we think they do. Philosophy, war prophet. The colonel's tone was skeptical. That's a luxury for rear area thinkers. Frontline soldiers deal in practical matters. Respectfully disagree, sir, Hassan said. In my experience, soldiers who don't understand why they fight are the first to break when the pressure becomes extreme. Augustine spoke up, his voice still carrying traces of his transformation. We learned that corruption and purity aren't always what they appear to be, that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected sources. Sofia, who had been quiet through most of the debriefing, finally found her voice. Sir, I've been thinking about what I've seen, the false sanctuary that fed on faith, the creatures in the mine that were once human, the captain who chose to merge with that ancient thing. It seems like everyone in this war is becoming something other than what they started as. Including us, Chen added quietly. Colonel Harrison set down his pen and studied them all carefully. Are you suggesting that this war is fundamentally changing the nature of humanity itself? Yes, sir, Marcus said simply. The question is whether we're changing into something better or something worse. And your conclusion? Marcus looked at his surviving companions, the zealot, who had learned compassion, the doubter, who had found purpose, the enemy, who had become an ally, the transformed soldier, who had gained wisdom. That depends on the choices we make, sir, day by day, person by person. The colonel was quiet for another long moment. Outside the bunker, the sounds of the eternal war continued, artillery fire, the rumble of supply trucks, the prayers of soldiers preparing for battle, the same sounds that had echoed across this landscape for 8 centuries. Your report will be classified at the highest levels, Colonel Harrison said finally. What you've experienced, what you've learned, it's not ready for general distribution. Too many questions it raises, too many comfortable assumptions it challenges. But it will be preserved? Augustine asked. For when the time is right. Yes, and in the meantime, you have a choice. You can be reassigned to separate units, return to your normal duties, try to forget what you've been through together. Or, sir, Marcus prompted, or you can stay together as a special reconnaissance unit. There are other mysteries out there, other areas where conventional forces fear to tread, places where soldiers who understand the true nature of this war might be able to make a difference. The 6 survivors looked at each other. They had started as strangers bound only by military necessity. They had become something more, Macedon family forged in horror and tested by impossible choices. Together, Sofia said firmly. We stay together. Agreed, Hassan added. We've learned to trust each other. That's too valuable to waste. God has shown us that faith takes many forms, Ezra said. I would continue to learn from my companions. The transformation continues, Augustine observed. Better to face it with friends. Yes, sir, Marcus said formally. "We volunteer for continued special duty." Chen simply nodded his agreement. Colonel Harrison made a final note in his file. "Very well. Report to Major Webb in Special Operations tomorrow at 0800. He'll brief you on your first assignment." As they were dismissed, the colonel called out one last instruction. "Sir, in your next report, when you describe the Communicant's sacrifice, make sure you note that it died as a soldier, not as an experiment. Some records need to reflect the truth, even if the truth is classified." "Understood, sir." They emerged from the bunker into the pre-dawn darkness. Above them, the first faint light of dawn was beginning to push back the eternal twilight of the war zone. It wasn't much, just a suggestion of hope on the eastern horizon, but after what they had been through, even that small light seemed significant. "What do you think they'll have us do?" Sofia asked, as they walked toward the temporary quarters they'd been assigned. "Does it matter?" Hassan replied. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." "The war continues," Ezra said, but his voice held acceptance rather than fanaticism. "We continue with it." "Changed," Augustine added, "but not broken." Marcus looked back toward the battlefield they had crossed, where somewhere in the ruins, a transformed creature had made the ultimate sacrifice to save them all. "The Communicant was right," he said quietly. "We're all becoming what we need to be." "And what's that?" Chen asked. Marcus considered the question as they walked through the sprawling military camp, past soldiers of different faiths and nations, all united in humanity's endless struggle. He thought of parasitic demons that fed on corrupted faith, of ancient horrors sleeping beneath the earth, of enemies who chose transformation over death, and of friends who chose sacrifice over survival. "More than human," he said finally, "but not less." The dawn grew stronger, pushing back another night in the 800-year war. Somewhere in the distance, bells tolled the morning prayers in a dozen different languages and traditions. The sound carried across no man's land, a reminder that despite everything, despite the horror and corruption and endless struggle, something in humanity endured. Something worth fighting for, something worth dying for, something worth living for. The Lost Patrol had found their way home, but more importantly, they had found their way to each other in a war that sought to transform everything it touched into tools of destruction. They had chosen to become something else entirely. They had chosen to remain human. The story of their journey would be classified, filed away in archives that few would ever see. But the truth they had discovered would live on in how they chose to fight the battles yet to come. Together, always together.